All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us once again. If you've been here before, if this is your first time, thanks for joining us for our live Q&A. We've got a ripper lineup today with some people with a focus on our community services sector, but also from a digital experience point of view. So it's going to be quite an interesting conversation today. My name is Amy Ward and I'm from OTM. For anybody who hasn't been on these weekly sessions previously, we set them up back in late March, right at the beginning of the shutdown or the start of shutdown in Queensland and in Australia. And they've evolved from week to week. People have been submitting wonderful questions and we've been able to share some great information with our clients and wider community. Today we have Carla Scott from Churches of Christ in Queensland. Carla is the Business Transformation, General Manager for Business Transformation and Innovation at Churches of Christ. We have Mish Burkett, who is responsible for community engagement at Communify, which is one of Brisbane's, I would say I'm probably a bit biased, but one of Brisbane's most progressive community service providers, smaller organisation servicing the north side of Brisbane. And we have Warwick Sweeney from Integral Technology, who is joining us from what looks like a lovely part of the world in Queensland today. So thank you everybody who is online. If you're familiar with Zoom, and most of us are probably getting more familiar with Zoom over the last few weeks, you'll know that there's a chat option and a Q&A option within the Zoom tool. We'll be monitoring that throughout today's session. Feel free to pop questions into that chat tool and we'll make sure we get to them. I might actually get one of our team members who's on the line to just pop a message out there so you can see how the chat works in the session. So let's get started today. We're going to be looking at all things digital experience, client engagement, moving fast, experimenting, and it's all about helping those of you who have joined and those of us who are in the panel as well. We're all learning as we go to figure out how we do our marketing and engagement in these times of change. And at the point we're at now, it's really as much about looking ahead. So what should we be doing in the here and now, but also what should we be doing now as we start to come out of possibly the worst of the health component of the COVID-19 situation in Australia, but still perhaps a long road ahead in terms of our economy and the way our businesses and organisations are operating. So I might just let our panellists give a quick self-intro, because I probably haven't done them justice with the roles that they have. Mish, might start with you.
Thanks, Amy. I've been with Communify for over 15 years now, and I love my organisation. My role involves getting to know new volunteers, matching them to a role, and also head up our comms and engagement team. Yeah, I think as you said, Amy, our organisation aims to be innovative. We're always looking for new ways of doing things, but ultimately we're here to support our local community. So all our services that we've developed over 40 years have emerged from community need and interest.
Awesome, thank you. Carla, I might get you to introduce yourself and maybe just share a little bit about, I guess, what you've been focusing on in the last couple of months.
Okay, so General Manager for Business Transformation and Innovation at Churches of Christ in Queensland. So Churches of Christ in Queensland is a large not-for-profit, a quite complex not-for-profit. They've got multiple business lines. We sit in aged care, children, youth and family services and social housing services. Just shy of about 4,000 staff, about 3,800 I think, so a fairly significant not-for-profit organisation. With COVID, obviously, we have had a lot of just-in-time management and rapid response happening in our organisation because of the sectors that we sit in and because of the isolation and the restrictions that that's placed on business operations. So I guess my team has been focused specifically on working in that response area and working across the business to support where we can, because we're not frontline. There we have an awful lot of frontline staff who have been amazing, and the GMs of the business streams, their response to COVID has been quite remarkable in terms of the clinical practices that they've put in place, the operational practices that they've put in place in order to respond to isolation and what that means for continuing to service our clients.
Awesome, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Warwick, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do with Integral?
No worries, thanks Amy. Hi everyone. So I've been with Integral coming up to about 10 years. We're a medium-sized technology services provider. We provide a range of technical services, including things like digital and integration and business improvement services, nationally and internationally. So my role there as CTO is one of basically leading out strategy and delivery across our clients nationally. And I'll hopefully try and bring a perspective of what our different clients are doing in this time and how they're responding, and some of the things that we've seen about how to make the most of what's a pretty tough situation.
Yeah, great, thank you. And for anyone who's in the session today who's wondering why a group like us who is focused on marketing and communications and brand, why we've got innovation and business transformation and CTO roles on the call, I would say you probably shouldn't be asking that question, because there really needs to be a very tight link between the marketing groups and the groups engaging with your clients and with your market and your digital teams, if they're not within that group itself. So there really needs to be a very close relationship between the Office of the CIO and the Office of Marketing and Engagement, and a recognition that those two these days just really do go hand in hand. So it's really exciting to have you folks on the call today to be offering us that perspective, particularly for the marketing people on the call or the business leaders on the call who are wondering, you know, how they could be doing this within their own organisations. So I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have been put to us for today and some of the discussion points that we're focusing on. Carla and Mish, this may be more directed to the two of you, but I'm sure you could all answer here. But you two both work for organisations who support some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. Could you just share with us some of your experiences in client engagement or marketing initiatives or even service delivery during this time, and what you've had to do differently to help keep that engagement and keep that service delivery going for the last few months? Go, Carla.
Me? Okay.
Yep.
So I guess we've implemented a lot of stuff in the communication and collaboration space because there's been a lot of fear, I guess. We've also done an awful lot of reaching out into the corporate sector and partnering, which is not something that Churches of Christ has done a lot of in the past, but we've sort of tapped into, you know, contacts and friends, enemies, previous people that we've known, organisations that we've worked for before, to talk about helping us to navigate the way we're going at the moment, and particularly in the areas of surge workforce, where it relates to how do we make sure that we can contact all of our people. So we've done some things in the community care space. Deb Sporer, who's the General Manager of Community Care, has been really driven in this space and has achieved an amazing amount of work in a very short period of time. We've worked with the Queensland Government around, I guess, redefining the way that funding packages work, in terms of safeguarding the well-being of our clients, and we've used that funding to you know, develop things like collaboration platforms in conjunction with third-party partners. We've worked with some big corporates to help, who have got really established call centres who are in the process of having to stand down staff members, so I've reached out to them, and we've actually got teams in their call centres who are actually doing welfare checks for us and working with our call centre to get sort of better, I guess, better outreach into the sector. And then I guess just a load of stuff in terms of from my team in particular, still just stepping back from that frontline work, we've been doing a lot of work in the background in terms of how do we make sure that we're utilising the time that we have at the moment to put the building blocks in place so that we come out of this okay in a couple of months or 3 months or 6 months, who knows when it's going to work. So we've been doing stuff, and coincidentally, we've done quite a lot of work with Integral Tech in this space around stabilising and I guess simplifying our web platforms so that we have a lot more autonomy around those. They work better, that we are able to respond to our user base a little bit better and use those as a collaboration tool as well. One of the other focus areas in my team is business intelligence, and I'm finding that that team is incredibly busy at the moment. So lots and lots of dashboards being built across the business, both in the financial space and in other operational areas, just to try and understand the impact of the things that we're doing, so that down the track we can understand the impact of continuing to do things or stopping other things.
That's a lot of different areas of the business that you've just covered there. Have you slept for the last 2 months?
It's been pretty busy.
Just that answer there, though, is such a good example of how innovation and digital enablement transcends all areas of an organisation, and it's really coming to the fore in this time when you need to be able to move quickly, and you need to be able to engage with people, particularly I'm guessing in your sector, where you can't just leave people not knowing how they can communicate with their clients or even with your staff. You've got distributed people around the state, I think. So how has that worked with your teams as well, being so distributed?
Look, again, it's been a monumental effort in terms of communication, and actually, to be honest, in some regards, kind of old-fashioned communication almost, because we are, particularly in the aged care sector, it's a diversified workforce, right? We've got, and mainly in the personal care space. So to a certain degree, for that business line, technical aptitude, and I don't want to make a generalisation here, but sometimes technical aptitude is not particularly high. So we've had to actually come up with ways of how do we reach our staff, how do we talk to them, how do we make sure they're okay, how do we let them know what's happening, without using anything too fancy, really. So we're doing things like SMS broadcasts, we've got lots of emails. Again, the GMs are actually very focused on talking to their whole teams every single day, and by their whole teams, I mean their whole workforce. And then in the children, youth and families sector, which I'm not as involved in at the moment, I've worked more across the aged care space for Churches of Christ. They obviously have different issues, again, a younger demographic in their workforce, real concerns about what happens with the schools, because if the schools shut, then possibly we have workforce capacity issues with parents not being able to come out and work because their kids are at home. In the social housing sector, we've had, and in children, youth and families, actually, we've had increased concerns, which is quite prevalent at the moment, given the domestic violence week. We've had increased concerns around domestic violence, and concerns around and making sure that in our facilities and in our areas that we actually have ways to keep track of that, or at least be notified so that we can put action plans in place. So there's lots of different things going on. It's not a particularly well-aligned model, but it is working, and what it's doing is it's showing us, it's teaching us, I guess, more than anything, what will work and what won't work. And for me, in a transformation space, because we work across the business and we try and support the business where we can, and we pull inside my area things that are broken and we fix them up, and then we transition them back out into BAU land when they're fixed, I guess. For me, that helps with all of the recovery stuff, because I can say, well, why would we spend money on this fancy automation tool, for example, if we know that this is what's actually having an impact anyway? And you can do that kind of balance between what's going to be the impact around the change associated with that, the cost and the dollars around the change associated with that, versus what it's going to give us in the end, because we know we can actually get that reach through COVID with email.
Yeah, right. I might come back to you in a little bit to delve into some of the how that you've done that broadcast communication and how that's all working. Mish, I'd love to get your perspective, though. Communify is offering possibly a similar portfolio of services to the community as Churches of Christ, but at much different magnitude, different size of organisation, and you have a large volunteer base as well that you have to work with. Can you just share some of your experiences from the last couple of months and what you've had to change and how you've done that?
Sure. I guess just to get the perspective, we are a much smaller organisation. We have about 250 staff and over 200 volunteers. So but I guess, and our services are in those arenas, very similar: aged care, mental health, housing and homelessness, and some child protection work as well. We also have a childcare centre, and neighbourhood centres. So, but at the core of our services is very much a face-to-face delivery. So suddenly we were confronted with, well, if we're not doing that, how are we supporting our people in our community? What services are essential that we maintain safely face-to-face, particularly in the aged care? People do need daily visits and personal care. How can we do that safely? Where do we buy PPE? and then in terms of our neighbourhood centres and the communities and the relationships we have with people, how do we keep that happening? So so very quickly we moved to frequent team meetings on all different levels. We've always tried really hard to listen to our frontline people who are talking to people, our service users, and listening to what their needs were and what they wanted and how they wanted their services delivered for our aged community. Some people needed that connection and that and daily service. Other people really wanted to pause what they were doing, but we were able to move to maybe some regular phone check-ins. We've been delivering digital devices to people of all ages, and it's been incredible to see, a 93-year-old on an iPad joining in a group Tai Chi session, and it's, that sort of stuff is incredible. I think having our CIO is really connected to our teams and his team, really connected and really responsive to what it is that we're needing and wanting, and I think that has really helped right from day one. So when it was, rolling out devices to people and ensuring that that they were internet enabled and all that sort of stuff was happened really, really quickly, which was incredible. We all getting all staff working remotely happened so smoothly. That was amazing. So yeah, that stuff, I think that team connection was really important. And then in terms of client service delivery, our internal systems, our data management, how we keep track of the services we're delivering to people and what services people need and their vulnerabilities was really important as well, to know what to deliver and when and how. And then, of course, a heap of logistical stuff, because a lot of what we do is, one of our key services at our community centre in Barden was the food relief pantry. So people coming in twice a week to collect food, make social connections, use a laptop, get some counselling. All of a sudden, that had to be managed remotely. So we've been doing lots of remote delivery, pivoting stuff, volunteers as well. So from face-to-face social support stuff to moving to phones, online, remote, changed roles.
Lots of change and moving fast there. In this time, what would you say the split has been with regards to your communications on marketing and that sort of communications? Have you still been doing that during this time, or has it been more existing client service delivery comms?
Yeah, so we've sort of ramped up our e-newsletter to a more frequent delivery. We always try to address things on all levels. So we're putting lots of good news stuff, lots of happy stuff on social media. We've got so we're connecting with people by traditional sort of email, but we're also, for some of our older clients in particular, a hard copy newsletter is important as well. So that, we're still doing that, and that's getting out to our through our home care team.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mish. Warwick, I'd like to change tack a little bit here, because Integral, you work in this sector, but you also work with clients across pretty much all sectors in the country. It'd be nice to hear your perspective rolled up, I guess, from the different clients that you're working with. Anything of note, I suppose, in different industries?
Lots of things of note. In fact, it's been fascinating to watch how different clients have responded to this. Just picking up on, before I jump into that, just a couple of things on what Mish and Carla were saying in terms of engaging with clients and delivering services. I think there's probably 2 or 3 general things that we've found to be really important in this time. And that's a focus on what our customers value and what they need. And that may be different now. So that may be different to what it was 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. So we found that actually having that conversation with customers is a really important first step to being able to help them and giving them options. So they're all floundering at some level, and seeking options for how they handle the situation and how they enable themselves to get through it. So that's a couple of things that we've found important in terms of how our customers have responded in different sectors and the sorts of things they've done. Like I said, it's been really interesting. It sits on a bit of a spectrum. So we've got some fairly substantial customers in travel. So, for example, Virgin and Flight Centre, they're at one end of the spectrum, and they've really had no choice but to really batten down the hatches and clamp down and pretty much put everything on hold. Well, Virgin's a highly public case, obviously, and so they've put all their project activity on hold, internal and external facing activity, and just gone completely into survival mode. Flight Centre, probably pretty similar. And then as you work up that spectrum, you've got brands and organisations that are being focused and strategic about what they do and changing their delivery thinking and their customer engagement thinking and focusing on the things that are just really important and critical to getting through the current situation. And that's some examples there. Universities, we do a lot of work in universities, and they've been really hard hit as well. But big whack from international students, obviously, bulk of their revenue. And so they had a choice to do a similar clampdown, I guess, to the likes of Flight Centre and Virgin, or be a bit more strategic in their thinking about how they move to more digital and online delivery, and how do they better engage with international students, which is a big whack at the revenue. So digital engagement with international students, digital delivery both for domestic and international students, and being smart about student satisfaction and experience and trying to really maximise the touch points with students. So they kind of sit in the middle of the spectrum. And then on the far end of the spectrum, there's organisations, mainly public sector, but also some big brands that are really ramping up. And they're ramping up because they need to look at new ways to do things digitally and engage with customers, or in the case of public sector, with citizens and business. And it's been a really interesting thing to observe how that's transformed some of the thinking in the public sector, some of the changes to how bureaucracy normally works, a desire to drastically increase agility, which again is not something you associate with state and federal governments, but yeah, so a big change in behaviour. So that's how we've seen it across the spectrum. I think if you generalise that, there's been a big focus on agility, a lot more digital engagement, really driving increased efficiencies or attempts to. That's not something that necessarily happens quickly, but been a focus on that. And really thinking about the digital platforms that they need to put in place to support that. And I can talk a bit more in detail about some of those things if we need to.
Yeah, it might be interesting if you could, for the people on the call, it'd probably be interesting to hear, if you can, any examples of systems or processes that you have actually been able to put in place that they might be able to take away and consider in their own organisations.
Yeah, sure. One of the, it probably fits into two buckets. I'll deal with two different things. One around the comms space. So we work for an organisation, national organisation, Royal Australian College of GPs, who in this environment, obviously really focused on their member base, which is the vast majority of general practitioners in the country, and supporting them through what's been an incredibly topsy-turvy time for them. And the way they've supported them, it takes there's a number of dimensions to that, but one is through comms and just providing information. So that was a real challenge for them, because they had to increase their comms throughput and their ability to get EDMs out, and the ability for the organisation to process and build those EDMs quickly. And while they had the tools in place to do that, they weren't really optimising their use of it. So they had no real concept of marketing automation. They weren't really doing, everything was manual. And so building out automation layers around how they do their communications became really important, and reaching all of their 40 to 50,000 members quickly every day, and being able to do that without putting in loads and loads of horsepower from a manual labour perspective to try and get those across the line. So strong focus on marketing and email automation there, been really important for them. The other interesting one, and that may align with some of the things that people on the call are needing to do, I'm not sure. But the other really interesting one for us is where we've seen customers actually madly ramp up projects. And there's a number of different areas, but they all fall loosely into putting digital platforms in place to support what they're doing with customer engagement or citizen engagement. And I mentioned earlier that state and federal governments drive to digitally engage citizens. there was some activity around this prior to COVID really hitting, but it caused them to really seriously ramp it up and to act much quicker. And so we've got a number of state governments, Queensland, WA, and a couple of others around the country that I can't talk too much about, but who have basically gone down a path of looking to simplify the digital engagement with constituents and with businesses. And that means providing sort of ubiquitous digital access to all government data. Now, that's cross-agency, so that's a real challenge. But the key enabler for that, which is really interesting, is to be able to engage people digitally and to have a digital identity that people feel comfortable sharing with government, and leveraging that identity to provide access to all of these government services is a challenge that they hadn't solved before. And so we're doing a couple of significant projects around putting identity and access management platforms in place that allow the brokering of a range of digital identities. So not forcing new government identifiers or anything on people that don't like that. So leveraging existing identifiers, support the integration of those identities across all agencies. Now that, it sounds easy if you say that fast, but it's not. And putting in place the digital platforms to manage that identity sharing and brokering piece. So there's been a really strong focus on that federally and in the number of state governments to support that. So I guess one of the key lessons from that is that digital identity is a really important way to engage, or a foundation for engaging effectively with customers now, and members, depending on the nature of the organisation, and citizens in terms of the government context. So it's been a big scramble in that space, and it's been really interesting to see how quickly they can move when they need to.
How does that concept of digital identity and those programs you're talking about translate for smaller organisations? Are we talking about like customer databases, or?
Well, in most cases, we're talking about making it as simple as possible for customers and citizens to engage or transact digitally, and that might be by using identity that they already have. So a Facebook login or a whatever social login that they may have. Governments have been traditionally slow at providing uptake of an integration of those. So it's about being able to then map what you know about your customer to a form of digital identity that they feel comfortable with, and that may or may not be at large scale. That doesn't necessarily need to be at population scale with government. That could be at customer scale for a small to medium enterprise. Understanding who your customers are and having a good picture of our customers is one thing. Being able to take that into a truly digital space and engage with them transactionally online, and be confident that we're dealing with them and have a high level of assurance that we know who they are is another thing. And these projects are trying to bridge that gap, if that makes sense.
I don't imagine that either of you three have had much downtime in the last few months by the sounds of it. I wouldn't mind just looking, we're about half an hour into the session. I'd like to jump to some questions that were submitted prior to the session, but also just a reminder for anybody who's on the line live, please pop in your questions for myself, Mish, Carla or Warwick, and they can be questions related to their sectors, they can be questions related to marketing, whatever it is that you want to get answered, we'll do our best to answer on the line, and if we can't, we'll come back to you afterwards. This is a question around brand. Some brands have, this question came in from an audience member, some brands have acted confidently during this time. What qualities do you think have enabled those particular organisations to be so nimble and to be perceived as confident brands? I find I think that's quite a multi-part question, because there's the brand perception of being a confident brand and still keeping yourself out there. But the question about what qualities enables an organisation to be nimble is an interesting one. Do any of you have a view on this question?
I reckon that confidence might just be surface deep. If they're reacting like everyone, at least they're giving the perception of confidence. It's a great question. I think there's a few things that sort of enable the flexibility, agility, the nimbleness that the question implies. Effective decision making is probably an important one, and by effective decision making, probably not seeking decision by consensus. So I think that's a quality of most organisations that we see being nimble and agile. That's probably associated with strong leadership, and maybe strong leadership doesn't necessarily mean autocratic style leadership, but certainly the ability to delegate and empower people to be part of that decision-making process to get things happening quickly. And I think other qualities, and I'm talking organisational qualities rather than brand qualities, probably. It's more a culture of adventure and a mindset that's based on being willing to take a risk and try stuff, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe the last couple of things relate to having a good understanding of their customers and understanding what the best response is in terms of the mind of their customer, but also maybe a strong focus on their staff and their internal people to support that. I don't think we can overstate the importance of supporting our own staff, and I think Carla mentioned it earlier, supporting our own internal staff and those brands mentioned that question, and supporting their own internal staff to support how they've responded and how they appear to have reacted as organisations.
That's a really good answer. Can you add any more points to that, ladies?
Yeah, I think what you were saying, about organisational culture, I think has been really important to us. That we have a great, as you know, Amy, we have an amazing CEO who has actively pursued a real no blame culture. So I think that has given our teams confidence to try new things, and in this environment those new things it's all untested. So a lot of what we've been doing has been with no we don't know if certain things will work, but let's just give it a go. If we think it's a good idea, let's just give it a go and see what happens and be ready to catch if it falls. So I think that's really empowered people to look for innovative ideas and new ways of working with our community.
Yeah. That your answers in this question links to another question that we've been getting almost every week, and I feel like I've got a different version of it about to come up, and it's about, should we even be marketing and doing brand profiling in this time? And our answer has been consistently yes, as long as it's appropriate, and you're not looking like you're being opportunistic. If it's irrelevant for people at this time in the emotional state they're in or the financial state they're in, it's probably not the right time for certain messages, but maybe there are other messages you could be putting out about your brand. I'd like to move on to the next question here, which is, and this comes from a small to medium organisation. How do SMEs make our voices heard in the current COVID climate when the world and his dog feels the need to tell everyone how they are responding to the current issues? Who wants to take that one? You can go, Carla.
I guess my question back would be, what is it you're trying to say? I think yes, there's a lot of noise. Yes, there's a lot of people telling good news stories because that's part of what they're doing. If you can't be seen, if making a profit is kind of the perception of that is you're profiteering, which in my opinion are two very different things. It's okay to make a profit. It's probably not okay to be profiteering. But if it's okay, if you're trying to generate revenue, if you're trying to make a profit, then it's okay to be self-promoting your business in whatever way you can to continue to build on the strength of your brand. So with the SMEs, when I read that question, when you sent it through, Amy, my initial response was, well, what are you trying to say that you can't make yourself heard in the rest of the noise there? Is that an indication, therefore, that the way that you're promoting your brand is possibly not as strong or as powerful or as effective as the way some of the larger organisations are?
Yeah, great response. It comes back to that appropriateness of your message and the value of what you're offering, and is it relevant for the client base that you're targeting, current clients or prospective clients. Particularly if you've got something that you do think is valuable right now, then put it out there, but do it in an appropriate fashion so that it's useful for the market that you're targeting. Did you have something to add there, Mish?
I just wanted to say that that statement that everybody was putting out, everybody from the government departments to whoever you bought jeans from last week, our response to COVID. I don't know if anybody's actually got to the bottom of any of those statements when I started reading them, but I think that was a real example of that herd behaviour that has emerged since the beginning of this COVID. We all went out and we bought toilet paper. We all went out and the next week we were buying steak and putting it in the freezer. There was that interesting stuff. So everybody was putting out a message about our response to COVID. So we all better do one of those. And then I think we all sat back and went, hang on, is that really what we want to be doing in our communication space? what is it that we need to do? We need to give people essential information. Our organisations are about relationships. Let's make sure that those are strong with our clients. Let's work on our relationships with our funders. Let's reassure everybody that we're here, we're solid, and we're here to support. So that kind of stuff became really important.
Yeah, fantastic. We've had a question come in from one of the attendees. It's actually regarding employment. With such high levels of unemployment in some industries and rising, how do we see unemployment being tackled by organisations of differing sizes? And will we see apprenticeships and internships rise? Interesting question. Not one I would have expected in the marketing call, but I think we're all in a position we can probably address that question as leaders in our own businesses.
Yeah, it is a good question, isn't it? And I think we're probably all feeling our way a little bit as to what that looks like. It's been interesting to see how different organisations with different levels of social awareness and engagement have responded and handled the issue of employment and layoffs. But speaking from our perspective as an organisation, I think one of the dimensions to this is the sheer amount of capacity that exists within our industry now, and we're actually on the lookout for people with the right skills and the right capability, and treating this as an opportunity to really reset the mix in our team a little bit and say, who are the people that we want working for the organisation, and how do we get them? Because now is a good time to actually be looking to attract people, the right people that we want, and that potentially don't help us in the very short term, but from a longer term perspective, strategically, they'd be really significant additions to our organisation. And having that focus on the longer term means we can think about the benefits from the employment market currently, and hopefully add to the capability of the team. It's been interesting trying to do that, though. What we've found is that people, if they're not already unemployed, are really reluctant to consider moving. And that it's just another layer of instability and a pretty unstable time. And so, even if their jobs aren't that super secure, they're happy to wait it out for now. And so, yeah, not sure if that answered Dan's questions, but it will be interesting to see. I don't know what the path back looks like. I think there are opportunities for organisations looking to employ and attract and retain the right staff now to get some really strong capability into their teams. And commercially, if they can sustain it, it's a really good option. And more organisations taking that view, I think will help us get back to where we were a bit quicker.
It's a really interesting perspective, and you're right. There are a lot of good people who are going to be, potentially looking for new positions. We had a similar, not a similar question, but we talked a bit about careers for marketers in our session last week. And one of the questions that had come in was, around, gosh, I'm nervous now because I was really looking at progressing my career as a marketer, and I'm not sure now what's going to happen because there's going to be so many people looking for work. But the feedback from the panel last week was actually, no, there's nothing wrong with trying to be looking for promotions at the moment. And yes, there will be a lot of people looking for work, but there's also a lot of opportunity still out there. It just might not look like the opportunity looked like 2 or 3 months ago. So you've got to keep positive. You've got to keep putting yourself out there and being very, very clear on what it is that you want to do. Now, and this was some great advice from Lynn Hawkins, who was on the call last week, now is the time to be thinking, what is my dream career? What is it that I've been wanting to do? Just the same as we've been resetting and looking at our strategies for our brands and our organizations, it's not a bad time to be doing that for yourself as well. So think about, what is the company I want to work for in the next couple of years or immediately? How am I going to get there? And be deliberate and be strategic about yourself as much as you are about the work that you do when you're working for an organization. So great question. Thanks for submitting that, Dan. We're getting close to the end of the time for the session. I have so many other things I want to ask you all, but we won't fit it all in today. Which ones to pick? We've talked a lot about things that you have done and things that you have changed or done brand new in the last few months. Just quickly, are there any things that you've put on hold or just not done in the last few months that you've actually thought, maybe we won't bring them back when, you know, the next few months roll around? Anything that you won't bring back into business as usual?
I think we're still, well, in terms of our organisation, we're still really assessing what that looks like, I guess. So we've done a fair amount of work over the last 9 months, pre-COVID, in the alignment of operational planning to the corporate strategy, and all of the GMs across the business have done a lot of work in that space, which really puts us in a really good position now that we're coming out of the back end of COVID, because we can go back, reference all of that operational planning work that we did that was really positive, lots of KPIs and projects and tasks and everything came out of it for the next, you know, year to 2 years. Now we can go back and look at those tasks and those projects and those objectives in terms of what we've actually been able to achieve through COVID. And that will give us the point, I guess, where we can say, well, do we really need to do that? Because we've kind of leapfrogged that with the stuff that we put in place. It's not really required anymore. But there's a fair amount of work internally to be done in order to actually do that planning piece, I think, across the organisation. But look, I most definitely think we've had some great learnings around decision-making, around use of technology, around collaboration and partnership into both our sector and outside of our sector with organisations we normally wouldn't think to partner with. There's all been some brilliant lessons that have been learned through the process. Fantastic,
thank you. That partnerships one, I think we probably didn't have enough time to talk about that in detail, but I would say for anybody on this call or who's listening after the fact, looking for ways to collaborate and partner with organisations that you might not traditionally think of. You know, you've got to get innovative with the way you're delivering service or marketing or engaging with your markets. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're all selling and marketing to people. So people are multifaceted and they have needs that can be met by lots of different types of organisations. So if you can find complementary organisations to collaborate with, where you might have access to a client base, but they might have the systems or processes or wherewithal to actually help you deliver service, why not come up with those partnerships? Nothing wrong with, you know, not-for-profits working with for-profits, nothing wrong with government working with private sector. Well, sometimes there is, but generally not. So I do think, you know, if you take anything away from the call today, partnerships and collaboration at any level is definitely something to think about. We've talked a lot about digital experience. Very quickly, what should the skills mix look like in an organisation, and does it all have to be in-house? So if I'm trying to market my brand, engage with my client base, and everyone's talking about digital experience is the way I have to go, what skills do I need within my organisation, and what partnerships perhaps do I need? I'm going to let you answer that, Warwick. You moved.
Yeah, okay. I feel like I've jumped in too quick. So I think there's a couple of important things there. One of the things that we've noticed, and I can't remember, one of the ladies alluded to it earlier, it might have been you, Amy, in the drive to be responsive and agile and deliver at speed, which is one of the things that most of our clients have had to focus on. We've noticed that the need to better integrate business, so marketing and comms groups, digital teams within the business, with IT and technology groups for delivery has been really important. And we've seen the great business IT divide. It's been there forever, right? And it's a Chinese wall. Well, actually, sometimes it's a physical wall, and some of our clients are actually locked doors, right? That exists between those two groups has become a real impediment to delivery and certainly delivery at speed. And so some of the value that we've been able to bring as an external organisation coming in is to help bridge that divide in a way that couldn't happen with those internal teams, and having all of those skills internally, because it brings a different perspective. And it's also helped ramp up capability really quickly for them. So that's where we've found we've probably added most value is being able to engage across the business IT divide in organisations, help break that wall down and augment their internal skills quickly to deliver. That's not saying that having those skills internally is not the right thing. I guess that depends on the nature of the organisation, its size, and what they can afford to retain internally. But sometimes just having that ability to bring a different perspective and a different view on how things can be done, and just a set of different personalities helps smooth that process. So I think it's a mix in terms of your original question, I think, internal, and there's absolutely no issue with being strategic about how you partner and skills that you might bring into the organisation. And in our experience, that always brings a good outcome.
Yeah, we find that as an agency as well, that oftentimes our clients will say to us that the reason they bring in external help is for that reason. They want different perspectives. Sometimes they don't have the skills in-house and they need to move quite quickly. Other times they do have the skills in-house, but they want a partner, they want to get different views, they need more horsepower, whatever it is. There's often a case for having a mix of people within the organisation and external to it. We're seeing a lot that there's, whether it's in-house or through a partnership with agencies or other providers, is there really does need to be that digital literacy, I suppose, within the marketing teams and within the teams, the people leading those teams. There needs to be an appreciation of that being a real important skill set within an organisation. Otherwise, it's just really difficult to mobilise quickly and to engage with your audience, no matter whether you're a small or a large organisation. If I gave you each a minute or half a minute to leave any parting thoughts with the people on the line today, anything that might be helpful for them as they go away and think about how they can translate your insights to their worlds, what would it be? It can be a little thing.
I guess for me, it would just be, don't get caught in having to just, and it kind of top and tails to the last question as well, don't get caught in believing that you have to do everything internally. There's a lot of value in getting a really good skills mix with bringing in external expertise. You get this great value of skills coming into the organisation, knowledge sharing with your own internal staff, and you're not holding a long-term cost on your P&L, so it's always a good thing as well. So I'm a really big supporter of partnership and collaboration, and using external skill sets where you need them to complement and enhance your own internal capability.
Fantastic, thank you. Mish, anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think now, hopefully, what we're beginning to focus on is the road back, and as we do forge that way back to whatever it is, that the new normal, I think that it's important that we all reflect on what we've learnt out of this, that we keep our stories, what worked, why did it work, and what are we going to keep from this time as we go back to more face-to-face, back to normal work.
Fantastic, thank you. Warwick, any parting thoughts?
Mine probably focus around some of the observations made earlier and breaking through the noise and dealing with messaging in this time. And I think one of the things that I've learned is just to be authentic to the value that you bring to your customers or your members or your staff or whatever, and start with that position of authenticity in terms of your communications and your engagement with people, and the rest takes care of itself, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Look, thank you to the three of you for being so generous with your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And I think we probably could have talked for another 2 hours, or at least another hour, with all the different areas of topic we've covered. Thank you to everybody who has joined us online this week, and for those of you who have submitted questions. If you think of anything after the fact, feel free to contact me. You can also send an email to helpline@theotmcompany.com. We are answering questions offline as well, so in case you don't get to attend these weekly sessions. We've only got 2 more scheduled for May. It's been quite a mammoth effort to pull all this outreach program together, and I'm incredibly thankful to the people who have joined us in all the panels, and to my team and other people in our network who have helped us with answering questions and getting information out there. Next week, we are going to be focusing in on industry associations associations. So we have Clarissa Brand from Timber Queensland. She's responsible for strategic relations and communications for Timber Queensland, and generally a very experienced and very good marketer. But we'll be looking at those organisations who are in charge of a category or who are responsible perhaps for lobbying for lots and lots and lots of different businesses and brands. What are some of the strategies and tactics they've had to put in place? And I'll also put a call out if there is anyone who you think would be good to join in that conversation next week, anyone who's doing marketing or engagement for an industry association or a membership body who might have some good insights to contribute, please let me know and we'll see if we can get them onto the show next week. So thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday, and we'll see you next week.